done flying through hurricanes and
It's been a great. If 2020 couldn't get any crazier enough, southern U.S., the Gulf states get slammed by two potential hurricanes. Obviously, Laura made landfall and did some damage, but I don't know if 2020 can get any more 2020 than two hurricanes.
no kidding. I don't think we're done. I'm sure there's a couple more, maybe some more wildfires.
Yeah, we got the wildfires going on out west. It's just is the world just crazier, or are we just more exposed to it now because of everything online and social media and these wacky devices that allow us to live stream from everywhere?
It's like the old school principle: nothing sells newspapers like a tragedy. So I think they're selling lots of media coverage right now.
Oh, that's so true. That is so true. Oh man, like it's just crazy again, like this digital world we live in, and I think we're so accustomed to it now, like we don't realize the principles that carry over into our everyday lives, let alone our businesses. We just don't realize how integrated everything online, from search to advertisements to just communication channels, are so embedded and so a part of our day-to-day lives. I just don't think we truly comprehend that or understand that it's 100% a part of our lives.
Well, it's crazy. Well, you get that feeling. I think there's an actual word for it, a phobia of when you lose your phone. You just straight up panic. You're like, I don't know what the word is, and I'm sure we'll Google it and we'll put it in the comments later, but I sure have that. I left my golf bag one day and I was like, where's my phone?
You feel handicapped without your phone.
Oh, yeah.
Right. I wonder, I would love to do a poll. Maybe we'll do a poll across all the channels. We'll ask, think about it. We can lose things and be okay, but the second we lose our phone or our screen cracks or something, people are running to the store to replace that device. At least most people I know, at least I do, because you can't live without your phone.
I bet you people are more willing to lose their wallet than they are their phone.
Losing your wallet's a pain in the butt, though. Canceling credit cards and
it's an inconvenience, but I'd rather lose that than my phone.
Than your phone, man. So yeah, this is. I think that's perfect to talk about again. That our phones and everything online, because we access the internet on so many different devices. I think the average user is 2.6 devices, 2.7 devices, because you have, we have smartwatches now, obviously smartphones, laptops, desktop computers, tablets, even on smart TVs, we're accessing the internet, and all of that stuff is able to gather data at one point or time along with this usage online. And the big thing for businesses and advertisers is ability to serve up advertising on those platforms, on those channels, and on those devices. And they do that through a thing called a pixel or cookies. So for I guess people that aren't savvy, people in our industry that haven't dabbled with online advertising or maybe understand what pixels or cookies do, Doug, can you give us a layman's term real quick, just so that we can get everybody on a baseline of what cookies and pixels do?
Yeah, and I'll give you some background. So the actual, the term pixels, what Facebook uses, and it's literally one dot on your screen. So if you ever talk about screen resolution where it's 1920 by 780, one of those dots is one little tiny piece of code that tracks all of your behaviors. And Google uses something called a cookie. And why they use those pieces of code is they try to understand, first and foremost, your behavior. What are you doing when you either get to our site or in an app? And then two, how can we start to build a profile and connect you as an individual from your web browser to your device to the apps you're using? And they package that information up. Originally, they did it, one, for analytics, is where it kind of all started with Google. And they tried to figure out, okay, how do we track what someone's doing so we can make a better experience? What the platforms realized is there was actually a ton of value in this user data. And we could package up this behavior and resell it to brands who are willing to advertise to access people with these specific traits. And it didn't necessarily start with the internet. I mean, you used to see this with couponing or any of the publishers who had a readership. So if
Mm.
you think about newspapers way back in the day, or the Wall Street Journal, perfect one. Like people reading the Wall Street Journal or the Financial Times, they knew that these people generally probably either had a higher intellect or a higher income. So advertisers would use that paper and say, okay, I'm going to advertise to people reading the Wall Street Journal because that's a match for who I'm looking for. But as you mentioned when we were kicking things off, we do so much on our devices nowadays that the amount of information that they've collected on us and the amount of behavioral traits they can see just allows advertisers to be much more targeted by using that information.
Mm-hmm.
The problem that evolved, which has always been an issue, is people's privacy,
Yep.
which is the article we're going to talk about today about what they call cookie apocalypse, where phones, it's a tough one to say.
Cookie apocalypse. That's a mouthful.
It is. So phones and internet browsers are starting to block or limit the amount of data that a cookie or a pixel can collect. And there's a big panic in the market, especially the digital marketing world, of how are we now going to advertise if we lose access to this data?
Mm-hmm. And that's important because obviously COVID changed fundamentally how we do business. You know, e-commerce, online usage, you know, YouTube, Zoom, every online major application, their usage is exponentially just multiplied through this whole COVID thing and online. And again, this has been a systemic shift in online behavior. And now, again, because we don't know when we'll be able to have events and be in person and sell in the ways that probably my industry is more traditionally accustomed to, that online now, the ability, again, to have that data and make the right decisions and make efficient decisions in your advertising is more critical than ever. And with them limiting that data, again, basically the lifespan of these cookies, it's certainly a roadblock into the effectiveness of what you do. And really what that means is that, you know, when you create content online, it's not a set it and forget it. You know, way back when Facebook started rolling out advertising and even programmatic advertising, and like, you know, you can build one or two campaigns and set it and forget it. I mean, much the way that print advertising is done. You know, you do a big production shoot, you create a nice advertisement in to be in a newspaper or a billboard or any other traditional type media, and it would run for the duration of 6 months, a year, whatever that might be. And now online, again, we're able to still do the same things, but be more dynamic and stay on top of trends and adjust and placements and all that stuff, which you just can't do in traditional media. So with them limiting those cookies, what it's forcing us to do is this kind of like hamster wheel, and it's this vicious cycle. And I think this is what we're seeing in the news and media now, is that, you know, it's not so much anymore about, you know, who has the best coverage. It's who can break a story first, or whoever you can put coverage first. So you're constantly seeing new content being churned out to stay top of mind. And that's what you have to do when you think about your content and engagement, is that you can't just post sporadically. You know, it can't be once every few months and expect that content or that message or whatever you're trying to do to have those conversations or build brand awareness. It won't have that longevity anymore, especially if you're dabbling in the advertising world. You, again, if it's a 7-day lifespan, you've got to constantly think about cycling your content, your posts, your advertisements, because now you've got to constantly keep reharvesting data. And we talked about this in a previous episode, was that all that content that you post on these third-party websites, you want to have a call to action to drive back to your website so it becomes your own data. And you're able to track so much more there instead of being dependent and reliant on Google and Facebook and LinkedIn and things of that nature.
I know Joe Pulizzi, who was the original founder of Content Marketing Institute, he always used to say, never build your house on rented land. And the number of times we've seen changes in a platform where businesses are solely reliant on something, the biggest and most relevant has probably been the disappearance of organic reach on Facebook.
Mm.
When business pages used to show up similarly to a personal profile, businesses were crushing it.
Oh
You know,
yeah.
they were able to connect with people, they were able to get like engagement and generate leads or business. And then when they changed the rules of the game because they went public, they now had a duty to shareholders to make revenue. And the fast way to do it was make businesses pay to play. And I think organic reach on Facebook is now less than 0.5%,
Yeah, it's bad.
right? You want to show up as a business, you got to pay. And this is not new. I mean, what's going on with this cookie apocalypse is just yet again another example of how important it is to build your own data profile,
Hmm.
because you're constantly going to be paying someone else rent to access it. And the challenge is what's available in that data pool is becoming harder to have access to. And with that, it will become infinitely more expensive. And as you were mentioning, I mean, some of the simplest things you can do is just start creating your own content.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, there's a really good case study. The guy's name is Marcus Sheridan. He's the founder of River Pools. And he created a really simple YouTube channel and just talked about, hey, this is how you check your chlorine, or this is how you change a filter. And he just kept posting week after week after week. And that saved his business. And to the point where he is now an expert in the content marketing space. He has a totally different agency and speaking platform because of the authority he built in that space. Gary Vee did the exact same thing with Wine Library, right? Like people have been using content for years to build a platform and build authority. But most small businesses, it's like they avoid the work.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and with the content, it's offering, valuable content, right? Because that's the thing. You're not just posting to post. And this is why mapping out the customer journey is so important. Because again, when people talk to us, when they come to us and ask, Chris, we need help with our digital marketing, right? We usually ask, what are your goals, right? And everybody wants brand awareness and everybody wants more sales. But those are two different ends of the spectrum, right? They don't see how they connect and what all the conversations and all the familiarity that has to happen from the time that somebody catches glimpse of you to actually wanting to hop on a phone call or engage in some sort of discussion about products or services. I think there's a huge disconnect there. So being able to have those types of conversations on multiple platforms whenever the user wants to have it is what you need to do. And I would liken it to, why people exhibit at conferences throughout the year at all different locations, all different events, is because they're trying to be where the potential customer is to have a conversation, right? It's the same principle online. You're trying to be everywhere that your potential customer is, and trying to spark a conversation. And you do that again with valuable content. And if you continue to put out valuable content and just continue to show up, like you had mentioned with Marcus Sheridan and Gary Vee, all of a sudden, like in the subconscious, there's a familiarity to you. They're like, oh, it's almost like I know this guy because they keep seeing you over and over and over again. And granted, again, these platforms will only reward the content that's, the algorithms are so smart that they're able to dissect everything that's going on in the content, to be able to serve it up to people. But man, like that's why collecting the data and putting it in all the platforms there is so that's going to allow for continued engagement, which is what you want, because that's going to drive more and more to the bottom of the funnel to those conversions that people are looking for when it comes to their ROI on advertising.
One of the things I think people miss the most, even when they try to look at their customer journey,
Mm-hmm.
they forget to look at the length of their customer life cycle.
What do you mean by that? Go a little more depth in that for our listeners.
So when you look at the customer life cycle, so for example, most business to business clients, it takes somewhere between 6 to 18 months for them to close a deal.
Yep.
And they're relying on what might be, let's say, I'm going to run a 3-week campaign.
Yeah.
Like, just do the odds on that. I mean, you're talking about a small fraction of window of time for people spending probably 5, 6 figures on a service.
Yep.
The reason the cookie pool or the cookie apocalypse is such a problem is they're continuing to shorten the window that they allow you to track.
Mm-hmm.
So in business to business, if your lead cycle is outside 30 days, you've lost the ability to track that person now. So even retargeting ads, which if you're not familiar with those, you go to a website, you look at a product, all of a sudden that ad follows you everywhere. That's a retargeting ad. Your ability to effectively use retargeting ads is getting less and less, with the exception of the bottom of the funnel where they're closest to converting. So if you're not producing content or you're not finding ways to engage customers for those first, let's say, 17 months and keeping them warmed up, sending out email content to them, having a sales team have regular engagements or sending updates or sharing industry news or setting up events, it's going to be harder and harder for you to convert them.
Yeah. Yeah. And with that, I think when we talk about content and having that engagement and warming them up, I mean, you're I'm trying to think of the word to say it, like you're emotionally resonant with those brands, because we already discussed it's getting more and more difficult to target products or prospects and customers with hyper specific advertisements, as we discussed. So I think we're going to see an increase in brand advertisements. I'm so tongue-tied this morning, that appeal to more broader stuff. Again, it's going to be more top of funnel type content, because you're going to see a broad spectrum of platforms, broad spectrum of messages that hopefully you can capture somebody or somebody likes or shares. And then those concentric circles of interest, similar look-like audiences will be able to get pulled into that funnel in a sense. And again, you've got to be able to sequence your messaging in a way that you're offering something of value where you can collect information, name, email address, phone number, all that stuff. Like that's what your outside or inside sales team should be doing anyways, on a face-to-face type basis. They need to also be doubling down on their efforts online with that. So, and obviously when in the current environment we're in with COVID and everything else, you need to have some emotional intelligence with those messaging, more sympathetic. It's again, you need to make it about the customer or your prospects. It's not so much about you and your product or service anymore. It's how do you complement their life? How do you make their life better? That's going to be the other shift that you need to think about when it comes to this. And that's how, again, you're going to create that emotional resonance and people come back to your content. And again, that way you don't really fall in the trap of, hey, that 7-day life cycle of these cookies, you're constantly saying it's top of mind and you're providing value constantly to these people. And that's where I think you're going to see the most people win.
I think you're right. Like, you nailed it, because I think as COVID has come through, it's shown a lot of glaring flaws in businesses. Mm-hmm. And the single most important strategy for most businesses has been customer retention. And if you didn't have a good customer experience, chances are you lost customers. But if you were one of those brands or companies that took care of your customers, you probably thrived during these times. Like, you probably picked up some business as a result of how you treated your customers.
Yeah.
And I think as people sit down and they really look at what does the customer journey look like, they need to go beyond just customer acquisition. And they need to understand how important it is to retain and how they treat their existing customers. Because that's the footprint that's going to understand, okay, this is actually what we do best. This is what we're known for. These are the people who actually share our content for us and expand our sphere of influence that you're mentioning.
Yeah, they become your fans. I mean, and that's where the referrals, and I can't tell you how many businesses that tell me they're like, Chris, we don't need to advertise. All our business is generated from referrals, and that's fine and that's awesome. But eventually that well dries up because your reach is only so much, and that's why you got to constantly create more lookalike audiences and reach more people with similarities. And to do that at scale and to do it in efficient ways, you got to do it online. There's no way around it.
Yep, especially now. Especially, and I don't see events coming back anytime soon, as much as I want them to.
And
At
certainly
least
not
not
the
the way they
way,
were.
not what we're accustomed to seeing. You know, these mega events, like, you know, aside from my industry events, like, you know, CES or SHOT Show or the PGA show, where you have tens of thousands of attendees. Like, I just can't foresee those going back to anything of what we recollect or remember those being.
But when we do though, that's a perfect example of how very few companies take the time to look at how does that event fit within a bigger picture of the strategy.
Hmm.
Are they using that event to convert people there into their own list? And not just a list of people who want a free iPad or, free earbuds.
The fishbowl of business cards.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the little fishbowl context. You know what? Even if you did the fishbowl thing and you had really good content that followed up the show, you're going to be able to weed out like, okay, these people based on their behavior, they're clicking, they're opening, they're coming through, they're moving through.
Yeah.
But most people just like they get so caught up in just being at the show, they don't think about things like the pre-show marketing. How are we engaging the audience ahead of time? What do we do at show? And both you and your agency, like you guys do an amazing job of showcasing what's going on at every event you go to. And you bring that value back into the association and all the peers in the marketplace. And I probably attribute that to a lot of the success you've had so early on in your agency. But very few people and brands take the time or carve out the budget to do that. I mean, if you're going to spend, let's say, $500,000 to get your planes to the show, showcase it, host these glamorous events, do the test flights, carve out money to grab some content for that and share the experience on social.
Yeah. Yeah. There's
Like a small win.
yeah, just until recently. I mean, just last year, it was like really the first time that I think social was really highlighted. You know, they had a dedicated like Twitter feed or Twitter wall, which, you know, compiled all the hashtags, you know, from the, and it was encouraging people to share. And that's where, again, like, that was the first time that I was really like, wow, like there's a really big emphasis now on social media. And it's not dependent on, again, the daily magazine or newspaper or things of that nature. Because one, it's just expensive. I mean, to be able to churn out a 15, 20 page, really nice print magazine, yes, they look amazing. They're awesome. And I think they do have some place in your marketing mix. But man, like that's just a lot to churn out. And again, there's no way to track the effectiveness of any of those advertisements, you know, again, to draw them deeper into your funnel or offer them up some other content, some other value that's going to create, again, more brand affinity or create that emotional connection to something in the show that they experienced that they want to come back to and you know, figure out what else can this company do for me, or how else can they help make my life or my business better?
It'd be interesting to do is interview or do a poll on some of the people who'd exhibited
Uh-huh.
and how many people had a dedicated salesperson to monitor social channels. Because I
Ooh.
guarantee you're going to have people that are active in the Twitter conversations or active in LinkedIn comments that are perfect prospects for customers. But nobody's paying attention.
No.
Because remember, we started this whole thing off with being where your customers are.
Yep.
Well, they're in the hashtags contributing to the conversations. But you as a brand, like most people probably don't have a presence or paying attention to that. And whether they're actually at the show or not, that's a perfect place to grab low-hanging fruit.
Yeah. Yeah, the social listening's huge. But that's where I think this whole process and everything is such a daunting task to people, because there's just so much you have to try and keep up on. And let's be honest, like the majority of people, like that's not their forte. It's not their wheelhouse, and they don't have the robust in-house teams to sustain that, right? And that's where, again, it gets really hard. And I think that's where a lot of people have felt like their investments have fallen short. And I think that's kind of the beauty of what we do, because, you know, when you understand, like I said, when you understand your entire customer journey and all the different areas that you're able to gather data and possibly weed and convert those into from prospects to market qualified leads to sales qualified leads through content and conversations, you really, really start to understand where your time and effort and money should be spent to drive those things, and constantly evaluating it. And that's where, again, I think that's where we help thrive and help people really understand, our flight plan, our digital blueprint, our digital flight plan, is that you start to see these drop-offs in performance, right? I mean, it's just like when you're flying an airplane, you're constantly monitoring your instruments, you're constantly monitoring your systems, like when your engine starts running hot, or if your oil pressure is low, all this stuff, you're constantly monitoring fuel, you're doing fuel checks. Why are we not doing that in our business with all of our stuff that's supposed to be sales generating activity? And yeah, not every piece of content you post online is again to try and sell people, but that is, again, another conversation you're trying to have to draw people in to have another conversation, a deeper conversation, and create that awareness to consideration to ultimate conversion. It's, again, it's that hamster wheel you have to be on, but that's what salespeople do, and that's what pounding pavements and dialing for dollars. Everybody's familiar with those, the door to door and the phone calls, and it's just a vicious cycle. You have quarterly quotas you got to meet, you have semi-annual, annual quotas. This needs to be folded into the mix now, again, especially since we don't have events, and again, going forward, as already we've noticed, if you've not accepted that customer buying experiences and customer expectations have changed, more and more people that are coming into the ideal customer, i.e. millennials, the older millennials, they've grown up, yes, they knew life pre-internet, but their entire adult life has been embedded and surrounded with the internet, and everything's online. So you have to absolutely understand that that's where they're going to gather information. That's where they're going to start looking at you and considering, who the heck are you? And if the information is not out there for them, they're going to pass you over, or you're not even going to be in contention to even have a conversation.
I couldn't agree more. Where do people get this flight plan, Chris?
So you can shoot us a message on here on that, but I'll put a link in the comments for us. We start with it's just an intake form, just to get some basic information on what you've been doing, what's been working, what hasn't been working, and again, if somebody doesn't understand the journey, we go into like a free little 15-20 minute consult just to explain the process. And when you break it down, again, the way that we do, and like in typically 6 phases, people start to understand how that fits in their sales cycle. And again, it's all about documenting and creating repeatable excellence within your own business. And that's kind of the template that we've used to great success, because again, it maps out specifically what has to be done to move from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3 to phase 4, and then 5 and 6, and then it just repeats. Again, you're not making stuff up. You're simply just tweaking and testing at this point, which again, I think everybody does in their sales cycle. Hey, how was this sales call? What did I say that worked for this customer that didn't work for that customer? And again, I don't want to open up Pandora's box of everything that digital marketing is, but yeah, it all starts with that. Again, it's just saying, hey, help me map my customer journey, and we can simply look, and there's a couple things, again, I think everybody can do fundamentally that'll help them get more data. Some of it's around the pixel that we talked about. That just helps them get better insight into their business and their marketing efforts. So basically, just let us know. Shoot us a message, say something in the comments, but I'll post a link to that intake form for everybody that wants to check that out.
Perfect. Because this one was an awesome one.
Yeah, it was good. I mean, it's definitely good. I think of it as, that intake form is kind of like, just because I keep thinking of COVID and how people like triage in the hospital. I mean, really, it's like taking vitals. You go, if you're feeling ill, you're just not feeling right. You go to the hospital, and the first thing they do is they take your temperature, your blood pressure, your pulse ox, and they ask kind of what your symptoms are. And then from there, they start to dissect a little more. You don't just walk into the doctor's office and, you don't go to the emergency room or urgent care and say, I think I need a heart transplant, right? They don't just jump into hardcore surgery, right? They make sure they take the time to understand and look at all the problems and kind of assess, is it this, is it that, to kind of rule things out, to be very specific by the time when they do get into something that's really gonna to change the way you operate. They already have a good grasp of what it is, and they understand completely what they need to do. So, but this is fun.
That's awesome. Where are you off to this week?
Oh, we're getting ready to go up to Michigan and Florida this week, and then maybe Texas again by the end of the month. We'll see. I can't believe it's already. We're getting into Q4. It's already fall. Pumpkin spice I'm seeing everywhere. Oh.
As you had that this morning too?
No, I didn't. I'm curious. We need to dig in and read about like how this whole pumpkin spice, like with Starbucks and the pumpkin spice latte, like it's almost a cult following.
Done. Yeah, I think we know what we're talking about next week. The phenomenon of the pumpkin spice latte.
And how to build cult followings. Oh my goodness. But anyways, I hope everybody has a wonderful day again. Website and everything should be going live soon. We'll get that spun up. All the episodes will be there to recap. We'll start bringing on amazing guests and continue this. If you thought it was fun, please share and let us know again. If you need any help, we're here for you. Everybody take care.
See you, everybody.